My kind of mode is to create allies in people, in the departments that I go into, who are the allies who are going to take this on, and it's going to become their kind of motivating charge. And then they're going to go and motivate other people.
Welcome to the Schmidt List, the podcast for people dedicated to managing successful projects, developing impactful products, and building engaged teams. And now, here's your host, Kurt Schmidt.
Okay, here we are with Tom. Tom, thanks for coming to the show today.
Thanks for having me.
It's exciting to have you around here. Thanks for taking time. I know you're very busy over at the Star Tribune. We're making lots of new digital things, right?
Yeah, we're making a few things.
And then plus you got all the social media stuff you got to stay on top of, right? Do you follow a ton of people on social media, or do you focus more on content creation?
I follow a good amount. I would say a healthy amount. A good ratio of how many people I follow.
See, I always wonder people that have like a larger than normal following, sure, how much they actually spend consuming stuff versus creating stuff.
Oh yeah, the people who have larger accounts, they're consuming a lot. I think.
Okay.
I'm like I have like a micro following, I would say. I mean, on a fine amount.
Sure.
But,
yeah.
But I would say
more than the average. Like,
sure. Yeah. But I have an unhealthy relationship with how much I check my phone. and I've come to terms with that. I want to say that publicly.
Is there someone in your life who reminds you of that unhealthy obsession?
Yeah, that might be the topic of discussion. Shout out to my wife.
Yeah. So let's go back to kind of where you're at, what you're doing these days. So at Star Tribune, your role is labeled digital editor, correct? Mm-hmm. So tell me about what that is. How did you get into the newspaper biz,
sure.
as they say?
And my role actually is goofy, so I like to say it straight out, is digital editor, content strategy.
Ooh. All right.
No, I say that just to be self-deprecating. But.
Well, and it's phonetic, punctual.
Yeah. I got a comma.
You got a comma. Yeah, that's big money right there. Okay.
But yeah, I've been an editor of the paper for about 5-6 years, and I started there. I really grew up at the Star Tribune. Right out of college, got a job there as the nightlife reporter. So I was covering bars and restaurants.
But you've always been, even from college, you've always been in the sort of journalistic sort of sphere, right? I mean,
yeah. I mean, I really fell into it. I wrote movie reviews in my high school newspaper, and then my language arts teacher knew the editor of the local paper, and they wanted to start a mentorship, summer internship, and my teacher, Mr. Mortrude, shout out to Mr. Mortrude, put me on that path. It really was I just fell into it. And then all of a sudden I was a journalist that summer and became a reporter and never looked back.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So tell me about what you're doing as of late. So recently you're in a new role, right?
Yeah. So I've been a digital editor for about 3 years, transitioned in the feature section from being a reporter to an editor, edited different various teams, and then really pushed to start a digital position where the editor is just in charge of the complete strategy of how our stories are published and promoted.
Sure.
And things went pretty well in the feature section. And now I'm taking on this new role that's a little bit more newsroom wide.
Okay.
And like I said, content strategy is a ridiculous phrase, but literally that's what it is. I'm going into other departments and helping them kind of amplify their, for lack of a better word, content.
Right. And impact, right? I mean, that's the goal, right?
Yeah.
So was it maybe years ago where there wasn't as much of a digital focus? Like it was, well, we'll just we'll do this story, we'll do all this stuff, and then we'll just publish the same thing online, right? There wasn't kind of two different strategies, I would guess, right?
Yeah. And, of course, the goal now is that there isn't two strategies. It's all one. But,
sure.
I mean, there's no doubt that if you need to articulate what the role and evolution of digital was in the newspaper world, it was kind of baffling, and in most places did it wrong. Mm-hmm. And that's why we're at where we're at, which is, the collapse of a lot of great newspapers, or at least the impending collapse. And I hate saying that because it's kind of sad, but there's a few out there that are doing amazing stuff. Obviously, the New York Times, Washington Post, and the Star Tribune happens to be one of them.
Yeah.
It's a mid-sized paper, but has been doing things right on the business end and now on the digital end. But yeah, I think 10, 20 years ago, this was a print world for newspapers, for the news business, and people were also printing, money hand over foot.
Yeah.
The margins were amazing. And, a lot of it, of course, is connected to the fall of print advertising, the classifieds. So there's arguments on like what, how the calamity all came together. But there's no doubt that, classifieds being gone was a big moneymaker. But, even if you like take away all that business stuff and just look at how a legacy, extremely important industry for America, evolved, it did not approach digital in the smartest way possible. So now we're kind of, picking up the pieces and trying to innovate and survive.
Yeah. Well, and to be honest, like it's not just newspapers or these more traditional companies are really struggling with this same sort of transformation, if you will, right? In your role now, you had mentioned you need to go and help other departments and things like that. Are these departments open for that help, or do they resist sometimes?
Yeah, they just roll out the red carpet and walk in. No.
They're just like, here's your pour over coffee that I just made for you because I knew you were coming.
With any massive amount of change, and this is change that has been happening for a while, but every person, every individual takes it differently. And it is kind of my job to now kind of figure out what is the best way to do this for individuals in departments, and there's no doubt that's challenging.
And see, so tell me what's the value message you come with, right? You must have some sort of almost pitch, I would guess, that you have to come in with, and is that have you honed that over time, or has that always been kind of the same? Like, how are you coming in and saying, like, without sounding like a jerk, where you're like, okay, so you know what, you're not quite doing it the way you should, which would be really easy to do, right?
For sure. Yeah.
Like, so what's the pitch? Like, what's the...
I mean, I'll tell you, I think the pitch, and maybe this is why I'm good at my job, but maybe not the best, is that the pitch is changing almost every day, or it's evolving. And I'm finding as I go day to day that I'm, evolving it, changing it. But I think, one of the reasons why I've been kind of tasked with this charge at the paper, or if you were at any other place, was that I kind of approach this on a very personal level. I believe in like the personal, and talking to people, kind of meeting them to see where they're at on whatever this change is, and papers it is digital. But after that, it is about like systems for me, but it's how like the individual fits into that system. Yeah. And I think you kind of got to like get people, you got to meet people there on that personal level. And, so I've taken like, leadership training, and I've been to different conferences, and, some of that stuff is super goofy, but a lot of it is like tried and true. Yeah. And I do like promote that idea of, leading people by finding out what their values are, and then motivating them that way. I feel even kind of dirty saying like motivating them that way, though some days I do feel like a motivational speaker.
Well, here's the interesting thing that I thought that you said in there, is that where I've seen other people trip up is they come in and they're like, I have this value, here you go, without understanding their space, or the things that they're worried about, or the things that they're concerned about, right? And it sounds like what you're doing is you also spend time understanding their space as best as you can before you just kind of, railroad through, right? So how do you do that? How do you find what's ways that work for you to really explore what are these other situations these other departments are in that I'm supposed to come in and help?
Sure. I mean, right now is a good example, because I've moved on from what my comfort zone was the feature section. Like I wrote in that section, I edited all of the different kind of genres of entertainment there and lifestyle. And now I'm working with the business department, and, I'm a layperson when it comes to business reporting, sure. But, at the end of the day, it's journalism. And these are like incredibly smart and sophisticated people. And so we don't need to talk really about like the day-to-day work. We need to talk about, and I think you kind of want to talk about this maybe later, like audience. And what does that mean? Right. And that's where I'm kind of bringing something new to the table that maybe hasn't been discussed a lot. It's been discussed because obviously newspapers have been thinking about their audience forever. Sure. But, that's changing like every month in the journalism world, as it is everywhere, that's interacting with digital. Mm-hmm. So, like I said, the way I break it down is the personal, talking to people about what motivates them, where they want to go, what their ideas are. But then it does kind of transition to how that fits into, for lack of a better word, what the company's vision is and where we're going to go. Right. And I'm pretty good at breaking down strategy for how a system has been working. So, in newspapers, there's a certain system to gathering news, writing news, editing, and then distributing, on your various channels, the homepage and social.
Sure.
But I always kind of have to take a inventory of how things have been going. And I know this maybe sound a little wonky or stupid, but it's it's like that has to happen. But then you need to be able to speak to people who that's not their job. It's not the reporter's job to think about all of those things.
Right.
But I would like them to think about those things so that everything can work together. And I'm kind of supposed to be, the middle person. Mm-hmm. But if everything is successful at the end of the day, the person whose job is just to report and write the news will be thinking about how all those systems are working together. Mm-hmm. But it's not going to work
because they know what their impact is.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So it is, for me, a lot of it is talking about impact.
Yeah. Because there's the obvious impact of like, I wrote this story, I have this narrative, and I've shared it with people, and people are now informed, versus I have wrote the story, I've shared with people. Now the company has moved forward as an organization, right?
Yeah. I mean, the worst thing for me that can happen with a story is that someone writes a blockbuster story, but it doesn't have the proper promotion behind it. And promotion is kind of a bad word actually to use, but I mean, it hasn't been given all of, the bells and whistles that are going to get it to our various audiences. And that's how I talk with reporters, editors, that if you write this amazing piece of journalism, but we can't get it to everyone who it should, get to, we've all failed.
Right. Well, and that's strategy, right? Yeah. Which it sounds like what you were saying before, it wasn't as deliberate, perhaps. And that's what's changed a lot. Yeah.
And, I don't want to even, sometimes I almost feel like I'm kind of speaking out of turn when I think about what was the strategy during the print heavy days,
right?
Where it was like, you write the story, it goes to the printing plant, and we deliver it to people's front doors, or you find it on the newsstand. And then how do we find out if people read the story? Besides, obviously, we have circulation, so it goes out to like 500,000 people on a Sunday or whatever.
Well, people just write letters, right? Yeah. That's how you find out.
But you're going to get like 6, and from there you can decide, like, did people like it, or were they mad?
Was it just these 6 people?
Or companies like the Star Tribune or other media companies obviously are doing focus groups.
More user research.
Research. But now it is, by the second, seeing how, using analytics. And so that's part of the change is getting, a large organization to see how we can use technology and to, inform how our audience has changed.
That's interesting.
And, I don't think this isn't like a diss or anything to anyone, but not, most newspapers aren't imploring their individual reporters to look at your numbers.
Right.
But I obsess over them, and I think it would be beneficial for everyone to, if you have that opportunity to use, what is almost not a crystal ball, because it is analytics is the reaction to the data to make your informed decisions. Why wouldn't you?
Right, exactly. You could just make tons of anecdotal decisions, but you got that information, right? Yeah. So with that's a great segue into your personal stuff, because you've got a great Instagram that I love watching. I love the burgers the most, I think, but the kids are super fun. Obviously, that is something that you've been curating for quite a while. Has your experience at the paper influenced what you do on social and how you do it? And is it, you were just saying, I know that even through Instagram, I'm guessing you get tons of data on what is happening and how much people are engaging. Is that also then feeding back into the work you're doing in your current role? Do they kind of just live in the same sort of space, right? But they're totally different mediums.
And that, I think that's changed in the past few years, where all of my social accounts, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, were connected to my job as this bar and restaurant reporter.
Right.
And so I was posting about food and, getting a lot of reaction from people. But as I became a team leader, manager, editor in the room, I kind of had to, my Instagram starts becoming a little more personal.
You had to pivot.
A little bit of pivoting, but also as Instagram pivots and it becomes this influencer world, we're now I'm getting, offers every week for different influencing opportunities. But because I work a newspaper where we're covering everything, I don't take advantage of any of them. And I can't,
But it's got to be complimentary, right?
What's that?
It's got to be complimentary, right? Somebody hey, cool. Can you post a picture of my towel with your burger next time?
For sure.
Right?
Yeah. But then, since I love it, like I love the what Instagram provides for me and what it provides for like the community of foodies and fashion. I kind of had to find like, well, what am I actually doing with this thing? Because I do, like, it is a psychological thing where I am acknowledging that I might have a problem.
But it's content. But again, it's content strategy, which is what you're good at, and you're doing it specifically curated around the content, which is you and your family and where you eat and stuff, right? Right.
But that's where I don't know, this kind of self-reflection comes from, where I'm deciding like, why am I doing this actually?
Oh, sure.
And because I could maybe have this other life outside of being a newspaper person, of a content generating, Instagramming, influencing type of person. Right. Should I leave journalism and
just pull the chute, and go?
I don't think there's a lot of money in that personally, so I'm not going to do that. Right. Stay in the Star Tribune forever.
Right.
But those are the type of things
I can see that
need to be thought about. And so then, and I'm not going to do this. I use my Instagram as more of a personal thing, though it is about like the city I live in. I love promoting all the cool stuff happening here. Yeah,
that's the cool thing I like about yours, is that it really highlights the great things around the city and stuff. I think that you do a great job with that. So with that, can I say, so how do these two things kind of combine in your head around the idea of audience, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to talk with you today about how do you define an audience, right? So like somebody is here listening to the show right now. They could be listening to it while they're doing something else, and they could be an audience member of something. I can be an audience member of 4 things at the same time, and all this stuff. So in terms of what you do at the Star Tribune versus the social stuff, do you view it as like these are two totally different audiences because they have a different mindset when they're? How do you make that slice? Is it by where they're at, what their mindset is at the moment, like what the context is? How do you look at that?
I think when we're talking about audience, I think like every point of contact through any platform is a potential for a different audience. So I'm thinking, and now that I'm actually articulating this, like it's ridiculous, but I think that that is a thought process that happens in my head, that every single moment you should be thinking about what your audience is. So, and this goes back to what, kind of your question about like journalism, the thought and understanding of who the audience was extremely different even 5 or 6 years ago. Because when it was print focused, it was it was kind of a captive audience. It was your circulation, and then whoever's picking on the newsstands. Yeah. But now you have the opportunity in journalism to seek out different audiences, but also like completely understand your own. So at the Star Tribune, I hope at other media organizations or any business that you are like doing hyper intensive analytics to understand who is reading your stuff, buying your stuff, and who is the potential to buy it or read it.
Sure.
And that's what we're doing at the papers. And we have even like goofy little words for like who these people are who are intending to, who might be potential customers or who are subscribers, and who are even breaking down that audience into kind of segmented understandings. But because and that's relatively kind of a new thing for me in the past few years, because that's what my job has been.
Right.
But I'll admit, like every time I send out a tweet, in my head, I'm having this thought process of, okay, who's going to read this tweet? And if I write it this way, will more people be attracted to it? Or
sure. But you would do the same thing as a journalist, though, back five years ago, right?
I don't know about that.
Really?
I don't know. Most journalists don't want to talk about how what they're thinking when they're writing their stories.
But you would edit your stuff, right? Yeah. I mean, you wouldn't just be a stream of consciousness. Like,
no,
you're not
but
writing.
I'm saying you're writing for a captive audience, like. When it was a print, print product, you're like, we got 500,000 people on a Sunday.
Not as easily disposable as like refreshing your Twitter feed, right?
Right. Yeah. But so today, when a reporter writes a story, like we have to think of the headline, like the digital headline, almost, for me, down to a science. Like what words are going to capture the biggest audience? What words are going to turn off a certain audience?
Yeah.
So, for instance, and this is getting a little in the weeds, but if it's a restaurant story and it's about, maybe it's a certain, it's actually about like a restaurant worker, like a chef or whatever. Okay. We might not put the person's name in the headline anymore, because that if a reader is scrolling through their Twitter feed and they see a name, so-and-so's opening a restaurant, but they don't know that person's name, I think the data showing that is a turnoff.
Yeah.
And they will just keep going.
Right.
But they might know the restaurant name or know, some other
kind
of broad, bold descriptor.
That's interesting.
But that's kind of, and that's where, I hope most people in journalism and have been kind of heading, but there's still a long way to go.
Sure.
With that.
Well, but then let's talk about the social stuff, right? So obviously in a lot of these forums, you have the chance to edit real time or edit on the fly. So you can modify it as you go, right?
Oh, yeah.
But I think it's a bit different, obviously, than when you're posting it in the paper stand. I mean, obviously there's redactions and things that can happen later or whatever, but I think so let's talk about though, that thing about the audience, right? Like it could be the same person that consumes a story on the Star Tribune as watches an Instagram story by you. Is that the same audience?
Well, I highly doubt that it's the same audience because, we've done the research to see who that audience is reading the Star Tribune, and I don't want to let all the cats out of the bag there, but
it's okay. They're different.
But they're different. Mm-hmm. Here's a little concrete example. The Star Tribune Instagram page. It's a pretty big page, in terms of kind of the local community. I think it has 50, 60,000 followers. And clearly there on that page, we know that outdoors type of Minnesota pride type of photos do better than other ones. Does that mean we're not going to post a photo off of the news of, Ilhan Omar doing something or the Twins winning? No,
right.
But I don't know. People like me are kind of
But if you're going to be pumping out regular, engaging stuff, we gotta
think about what people are actually reacting to.
So is that again? It goes back to the analytics and the data part, right? And I think that's what you're telling me. Like nowadays, you have so much more data than you ever had before, and that's got to be interesting because especially, and again, I'm not saying anything against the Star Tribune, but it's an older organization, right? And I'm guessing there's lots of people that have worked there for a very long time.
Very true.
And have this anecdotal information that has turned into fact, has been solidified into fact over the years, where maybe you're bringing some new data in and you're saying, yep, I get it. Like that seemed to have been successful in this, but the data is showing, I can imagine that sort of change is hard to have discussions around.
You have described that extremely well.
Well, I work with lots of organizations that are transforming or moving, right? Here at Foundry, we work with a lot of very large organizations been around for 150 years. And there is folks in there, God bless them, that their anecdotal information, the things that have made them successful, here's the way I put it. The things that have got them here are not going to get them there. Right. And finding where that line has been difficult. Yeah.
And so that's why I think it kind of falls to people like me who've been able to find a way to merge those two things, merge people who are experts who have become experts over time in their particular fields and have, a base of knowledge that they think is right and probably is right. Their instincts, for lack of a better word, but then bringing this new set of, data that might be saying something else, and how do you kind of bring those together? And so, I think a lot of it is, when you're talking about leadership, it's about tone. Finding that middle ground. So, for sure, straight up, I've talked to a lot of reporters who have been at Star Tribune a long time and who are amazingly smart people, and they know their beats really well, and they have an instinct of what they think is going to do well or connect with readers. Right. And sometimes those things don't connect with the new digital readers or whatever. But it's about kind of finding that that middle ground, and then
so kind of the spirit of maybe where they come from, but the execution of the new, right?
To me, that's where the talk of audience comes in. Okay, because I think I can do a pretty good job with the folks I'm working with to say, well, here let's break down what we know about our audience and see how well this certain person's expert base of knowledge is on this topic, and if those are connecting. And most people who love what they're doing and are committed and passionate about journalism are going to say, oh, okay, this is interesting. This in terms of audience, and maybe, for sure, everyone can apply, what they know to this new kind of, strategy around our audience. But there has to be talk, and there has to be, and I think a lot of it is about tone, because I would never, And I think that applies. And I know you've talked to me about this before. Like, you can't just run up in a place and be like, here's what we're doing.
Yeah.
You throw over a desk and
sit down, shut up, grab a pencil. This is what I said. This is what we're doing.
I mean, there's no doubt that in like the digital sphere, doesn't matter if it's journalism or something else, that is the way that some people are doing things and have done things. And that ain't the right way to do it.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, it's just fascinating to me because I'm old enough, obviously, to remember when there was 3 channels on the TV. That was about it, right? So, for me, this whole growth of, I guy Gary Vee wrote a book. I think it was. I haven't read it, but the title was called The Attention Economy or something like that, right? Mm-hmm. And I just find it so interesting because like newspapers and broadcasts and all those things had such a stranglehold on the idea of attention,
right.
Whereas now people talk about there's 500 channels. It's like, no, there's like 5 million different channels.
Right.
5 billion different channels I can choose from, right? Depending on who I follow, how often I check, right. What my notifications are set at. There's all these different barriers and things, which I'm sure you've explored in great detail. But like, how does that new sort of economy of attention you're experiencing it on your social side? You've got it on the digital side at the Star Trib. Like, in that attention, isn't that where you're defining audience? Like, this audience pays more attention to this stuff. This audience doesn't pay attention to this stuff. Is it more around where that attention comes in? Is that where you're seeing? Do you know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, because once you identify who your audience is, you have to understand how they operate.
Yeah.
How they connect with you on, the 5 million, platforms and access points you just mentioned.
Yeah.
But for a company, like a large company to be successful, like I can't be the only person that knows that in my digital team. Like all of the people down, from the reporters, editors, photographers, all need to be knowledgeable on that. And I think that's where we're at in probably a lot of industries.
Sure.
I think that's an exciting thing to be able to, spread knowledge in a good way and get people excited about change. But that is like the battle. I hate using the word battle. Because I'm not like fighting with people. Yeah,
but you're fighting for what's good for everybody.
Yeah. And I have this I feel like a bit of a ridiculous slide deck where when I meet a new team and I want to like kind of talk to them about where we're going, like the first slide is something like what we're fighting for.
Nice.
And it's a little much.
No,
but
think
at the same time, like for real.
See, I like that you talk about that because I think that is I just did a talk a couple weeks ago on strategy and what does strategy mean and all these stuff, right? And the first step in creating a strategy is establishing a vision, right? Establishing where we want to go, right?
The goal.
But you also have to really understand where you're at now, because you could think that you're just kind of living in this future right now, but you're actually not, and there's all these different ways of understanding kind of where you are. You can do a SWOT analysis, you can do all this stuff. But like you said, now that you have this data, it makes it a pretty easy story, or easier story to tell, right?
Yeah.
Because it's like, as you can see, when we do this sort of thing, this is where things grow. When we do it this way, this is where things shrink. And so let's do more of this other thing.
Yeah. I like how you call it a story because that. That's how people connect with. Yeah. Not like you're literally telling them a story, but like what is like, and that's when I say, what are we fighting for? Because to me, this is kind of life or death for these jobs, for sure, for the industry that many of us, on the journalism side love. One of the leaders in my newsroom has said this phrase, our fate is in our hands now, like literally because the content, like the stories we're selling digital subscriptions. And that's where a lot of, the financial windfall will come going forward. To me, that's really exciting because, and so that's part of the story on how I pitched to reporters, editors that, it isn't about, still about advertising and somewhat, but more and more, it is actually about the stories and the content. And we want them to be good. We want people to see them. We want people to pay for journalism. Yeah. Which is a crazy concept, I know.
It is a crazy concept. I can't believe you would suggest such a thing. Well, and I think that's interesting that you kind of mentioned the pitch deck and things that I like how you're being very deliberate about that communication. I think that's where other places struggle with is they assume like, well, I'll just send out an email to everybody saying, we're going to do this new thing. Just let me know if you have any questions. And they expect like actual people have questions. And
I wish it was that easy.
But why can't it be that easy? Why can't that person just come up and say, hey, I didn't understand this?
Right.
Well,
that is a good question. Is that a question? Because that is a good question.
Yes.
Like, why can't it be that easy?
Why can't it be that easy?
Because we know that people have 100 other things that they're doing. They got in at least at the newspaper, these reporters have to put all of their will into, producing great journalism. So sending them an email, but here's the new rules of things. Let me know how that goes. It's just never going to happen.
Well, what about if my follow-up emails were when you don't do it and I use my Minnesota passive-aggressive language, like per my last email, or as we discussed, or if you need me to re-forward the email I sent you before, I will do so. Thanks. Have a great day.
This is all flashing before my eyes. Things have been done in the past. And, I really do feel awkward, bigging myself up. But the way I do things is desk to desk, winning the hearts and minds, which is also a ridiculous saying. But there's something to it. Yeah. If people don't believe in the person that is trying to attempt change, you got problems.
Oh, I really like that. So I think part of that, I've seen that in other places where they're not focusing on building a coalition as deliberately or intentionally as they should be. They kind of assume nope. I mean, I've got the best taste in burger here. It's obvious. It's obvious. Look at it. It's amazing. Look at the reviews have been amazing. And the people that don't partake in it are stupid, right? I've seen that sort of approach before of look, I've made this as attractive as I possibly can. The rest is your problem, versus going around and educating people on the ingredients, everything that went into it, because other people I've talked to, they're like, oh, that sounds like a lot of work. And these people work for me. So what? Yeah.
And to me, that is the worst possible thing can happen, that it all lies on, this culture changer's ideas. And so, my kind of mode is to create allies in people, in the departments that I go into, who are the allies who are going to take this on, and it's going to become their kind of motivating charge. And then they're going to go and motivate other people, because I'm not the smartest person in the room and I'm not the best motivator. But if we have a team, an alliance, an army of people doing it, hopefully there's going to be success. And and that's where you feel, I think, even personally, you feel a big success when you see someone take, kind of discover, what you kind of hope, they would discover and what you've been talking about, and go and do something way more amazing than you do. So
that's great, man.
That's it,
So do you feel it sounds like what you're saying is if you can help people kind of come to the sweet spot on their own, versus you just holding their hand the entire time, that's more satisfying, right?
100%. And just in results,
sure. And buy-in.
I mean, I don't know what it's like in other industries, but the amount of enabling that I am guilty of is terrible. I should be in jail, because you want to get stuff done. You want stuff to be good. So you just do it.
Yeah, but you don't want to just walk in and tell them to do it.
Yeah, because that doesn't work.
Hey, what? but you're the boss. You're the boss, and you should just be able to tell people what to do, right?
That sounds kind of good. What you just said though about being deliberate. Yeah. That is to me, that's when all the lights go off. Yes, we have to be deliberate with the spread of, whatever your idea is and whatever your change is going to have, has to be deliberate, and you have to find people who are going to carry the torch, and are going to be empowered.
Yeah. So let's say I'm listening to this and I'm leading, or I've been given an initiative for some sort of change in my organization. If I was sitting across from you, Tom, and I mentioned this and I said, well, what should be the first things I should do now that I've been given this charge within the organization? What would your suggestion be to that person?
I think one of the first things would be to go find who are your allies who are going to work as a team with you. And that doesn't mean to be everyone's coming to my team, we're going to go out there, but who are going to...
What if all those allies, what if all those allies I feel are already on my team, but those aren't the people that necessarily are going to get all the work done? you're saying, like, again, like, let's say I have to get marketing to do this thing, and I have to get sales to do this other thing in order to do this, to make this change happen. Like, are you saying find the allies that you currently have in those areas, or?
No, I'm saying find the new allies.
Oh, okay. Got it. I got it.
Yeah. And, of course, it's not going to be as easy as like going around desk to desk. Hey, you want to work with me? You want to be down with me? It takes time.
Yeah.
And, the way it happens is by kind of this, and of course, I don't know if this is the right way, but for me, this is what has worked. And it is, coming up with a set of goals, but then executing that on both like a high level strategy way, but also on like a person to person, like really like a person to person at their desk.
Yeah. Cause I've had bosses in the past say like, or not necessarily bosses, but peers when they've heard about maybe these initiatives, and they'd say stuff like, they're never going to go for that. Sales is never going to go for that. I look at that and I'm like, that sounds like a great challenge, right?
Of course, yeah.
I get excited about that.
But even with, of course, there's a lot that goes into like kind of accomplishing what your question was. But I do think a lot of it is like being really smart about educating. Like I always, whenever I walk into a situation, like I need to educate myself first. So I don't like walk into the situation and be like, well, here's what we're going to do, just off of one conversation. So, just for specifically in the, what I've been doing at the paper is, with a different department is I like break down, inventory wise, how have these stories done? What are the numbers? Who are the people writing the stories? What does their week, what does their month look like? It's kind of a lot. And then from there, going forward, and then going to the individual and being like, okay, hey, check out these numbers, check out how your story's been doing. Where can we go from there? And, everything starts springing, I think, from that. So it's like that system mixed with that really personal connection, I think.
Yeah.
And then hopefully from that, you're going to find like new, like we said, kind of allies to carry the torch.
And new opportunities, right? Because you're learning so much about their side of things and their environment. It'll also help you tell a better narration around the numbers that you do see and do have, right?
Yeah. And, I think one of the best things about someone who's been tasked with being like a change agent is this. And I think most people who are good at that sort of job know that they don't know everything.
Yeah. And they're curious people,
they're
right?
Curious. But they're accepting of like that humbling. So I almost every day, and I said this probably 3 times last week, like to myself, and then just like stood up at my desk and like, kind of blurted out to my desk mates, man, digital is humbling. Because I'm wrong like 3 times a day. But you got to accept that,
right?
And I think it's good to like promote those humblings too to the people that you're working with or trying to help change.
Yeah,
I mean that happened this morning. So a reporter was like, "Hey, that headline changed," and I think they probably didn't like it. But the previous one was not that good, but then the new one didn't do much better either. But I want to go have that conversation. Like, hey, I was wrong.
Yeah, right.
Humbled.
Yeah. But
it's all a process.
Yeah, instead of just like wash it under the desk, right? I think that's to your point, right? Even as a change agent in an organization, I've seen that where people come in and they just kind of focus on the positive, and I think you don't understand. You can't build the most solid coalition without kind of exposing some of your flaws and some of your weaknesses as well, because the goal is in building that coalition, those other people helping you fill those gaps you already have, right?
And I'll tell you, I would say it's like I've always had that kind of thinking about like how it's okay to be wrong, with what you're, especially when you've been tasked with actually being right all the time in applying, whatever the change needs to be. But in the past few months, another great kind of leader, digital mind, has come in. Actually, about a year ago, came into the newsroom, and recently he wrote a piece that was about. The headline was something like, everything, we don't know anything. And of course, like that he doesn't actually mean like we don't know anything, but like the idea. But at first I was like, what? We do know everything.
We know things.
We're going to show everyone and tell these
we
people.
At least know something.
Right. But then I was like, okay, I kind of get what he's saying. And that's how I've kind of been operating. But it took me a minute to like accept that, that as almost as a philosophy, that we don't know everything. And then I started thinking about how the people that you're working with, that you're kind of trying to tweak and change, like that can be a positive for them.
Yeah.
Right.
Especially
people who all they deal with is knowledge and reporting. And like, we got to be right.
Yep.
You know, like that's our goal, is to be right all the time. Be accurate. Maybe accurate is a better way to say that. Mm-hmm. Sort of.
No, sort of. Well, yeah, exactly. Because I think, again, not to belabor the fact, but these are folks specifically in that job. They're going out and talking and reporting on what other experts are saying a lot of times and bringing it back and then report, kind of being that vessel to say, this is what this doctor at the Mayo said about new treatments for cancer or whatever. Right. Like that's it's important to get it right. Yeah. All right. But it's also important that people read it and that get that you build that audience to do it, right? Exactly. That's cool. Yeah. Well, Tom, I want to thank you for joining me today. I really appreciate you sharing all these experiences with us on the show.
Thank you for having me.
So if I want to know more about Tom, if I want to see all the best burgers in town, for example, where are you most active? Where can I find?
I'm probably most active on Instagram, and it's just my first name and last name, and that's like that across all platforms. I'm so on brand.
Look at you.
Tom Horgen. Yeah.
Where do I get the t-shirts?
They're coming.
The merch, Tom Horgen merch. Cool. Well, no, and if I'm interested in learning more, obviously about Star Tribune, it's startribune.com, right?
It is, yeah.
Startribune.com. And I'll have links for everybody listening. I'll have links to Tom's stuff on the show notes in the blog post. So make sure you check it out. Tom, again, thank you so much for coming. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Thanks, Kurt.
Thank you for listening to The Schmidt List. If you want to learn more about how Foundry accelerates innovation, check out foundrymakes.com. And if you'd like me to speak about establishing a growth mindset at your conference or with your team, drop me a note at kurt@foundrymakes.com. Oh, and the next time you're on the internet, head to iTunes and leave the show a review. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend, because sharing is caring. I truly appreciate you taking the time to listen to the show, and I hope you have a fantastic week.